The median net worth in the US is around $200,000, but that number only tells part of the story. What does it actually take to be above average? And how quickly do things change as you move into the top 25%, 10%, 5%, and even the top 1%? Most people underestimate where they stand and how wide the gap really is between each level. In this breakdown, the numbers escalate faster than you'd expect, and the structures behind them matter just as much as the totals. This uses the most recent data from the Federal Reserve, adjusted for inflation. It's also important to understand what household net worth actually means. This isn't just one person's savings account or paycheck. A household usually includes everyone living together who shares finances, often a couple, and sometimes kids or other family members. So when you see a term like household median net worth, that figure often reflects the combined finances of two adults, not just one person. Household net worth is calculated by adding up everything the household owns, such as cash, investments, retirement accounts, vehicles, and home equity, which is an important nuance, and then subtracting debts like credit cards, car loans, and student loans. Some people like to pick and choose which items are counted in net worth, but net worth is a very straightforward definition and calculation, and it's defined as everything you own minus everything you owe. Once your household net worth reaches around $600,000, you're roughly in the top 25% nationally. This isn't a fixed number you stop at, it's a threshold. Anything above this level also falls within the top 25%. That may sound like a huge number at first, but what it actually represents can vary a lot, depending on age, location, and how that wealth is actually structured. Most often, a large portion of this figure is home equity, especially if you've just crossed the threshold. For example, let's say you have a net worth of just over $600,000. If you've owned a home for years, it's not unusual for $250,000 or $350,000 of that total to come from the value you've built in your house, through mortgage paydown and long-term price appreciation. The remaining portion is typically spread across retirement accounts, brokerage investments, cash savings, vehicles, and other assets. So in practical terms, close to a $600,000 net worth might still translate to a relatively modest amount of liquid or invested capital once housing is accounted for. It's a strong financial position, especially earlier in life with time for compounding to work, but near retirement, the same total can feel very different. The top 10% is a much more exclusive group, with household net worth starting around $1.7 million. That's a meaningful jump from the top 25%, and it usually reflects a very different financial position. At this level, people typically have far more invested assets and have had more time for those assets to grow. In many cases, they're older, further along in their careers, and have spent years benefiting from compounding, steady contributions, and rising home values. While home equity still matters, it's often a smaller percentage of their total wealth, maybe around 20 to 30%, rather than the bulk of it. A large share of their wealth is more likely to be in retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, business ownership, or other investments that continue generating returns. That distinction matters because once a larger portion of your wealth is invested, your money starts doing more of the work for you. Growth becomes less dependent on what you're saving each month and more dependent on what you've already built. That's why this threshold often feels different in practice. It's not that financial stress disappears completely, but there's usually more flexibility, more margin for unexpected expenses, and a much clearer path towards long-term financial security. For many households, this is the point where building wealth starts to feel less like pushing uphill and more like maintaining momentum. This is where wealth becomes truly exclusive, the top 5%, which starts at roughly $4.4 million in household net worth. In the top 5%, the difference isn't just that the number is bigger, the structure of the wealth is usually completely different. Once someone is in the top 5%, a much larger portion of their wealth is often sitting in productive assets. Things like brokerage accounts, retirement portfolios, business equity, rental properties, or other investments that can keep generating returns. Even if 10–20% is tied up in home equity, that still leaves several $1 million or more potentially working in compounding assets, and that changes everything. At that level, normal market growth alone can add more in a year than many households earn from working. A 10% return on $3 million is $300,000. On $5 million, it's $500,000. That kind of growth can create momentum that's hard to fully appreciate until the numbers get that large. That's why this level of wealth often feels fundamentally different. The gap between effort and outcome starts to widen. Instead of wealth growing mainly because of what you save each month, it increasingly grows because of what you already own. People in this group are also more likely to have had some combination of major advantages. Higher incomes, business ownership, real estate gains, inheritance, or simply decades of disciplined investing. In many cases, it's not just one big break. It's a long period of consistently building and keeping assets. The biggest difference is optionality. Of course, the lifestyles people live at this level vary a lot, but you could live pretty comfortably. At this level, there's usually far more flexibility in how someone works, lives, spends, and plans for the future. The compounding itself becomes powerful enough that if spending stays reasonable, the wealth can continue growing faster than it's being used. Finally, the top 1% is the most exclusive tier, with household net worth starting at roughly $13 million. Reaching this level usually takes more than just earning a good salary. In most cases, it's the result of a long period of high savings, strong investment returns, business ownership, stock compensation. And this group is also the most likely to have received an inheritance or some form of family wealth transfer, or some combination of all of these factors. The biggest difference at this level is scale. Once a household has several $1 million invested, compounding becomes extremely powerful. A portfolio of $10 million growing at 10% adds about $1 million in added wealth in a normal year, without any new contributions. To put this into perspective, building this kind of wealth through investing alone is possible, but it usually requires unusual consistency. Someone investing around $60,000 per year into the S&P 500 and earning an inflation-adjusted 7% return over a full 40-year career could end up in that range. That path is realistic for some high-savings households, especially dual-income couples who are able to invest a large portion of their income over decades. So that's why this group is so small. It's not just about intelligence or effort. It often reflects a rare combination of time, income, consistency, opportunity, and in some cases, luck. Most households never have enough of those factors aligned for long enough to reach this level. It's also why the top 1% tends to skew older. In many cases, what looks like sudden wealth is really the result of a lifetime of earnings, investing, and compounding working in the background for decades. So these brackets include all age groups, so the upper tiers are disproportionately made up of older households. Wealth accumulation just takes time. Years to earn income, invest consistently, and benefit from compounding. So that's something to keep in mind. What stands out most isn't any single number, but how the composition of wealth shifts as it increases. At lower levels, progress is driven mainly by income, savings, and usually home equity. At higher levels, though, a larger share tends to come from investing, asset appreciation, or business ownership. And net worth alone doesn't tell the full story. The allocation behind it matters just as much. If 90% is in home equity and there's very little in invested assets, that's a very different situation than a portfolio where 90% is invested in markets or income-producing assets and only a small portion is tied up in a home and other items. Even if the total net worth is the same, the flexibility and growth potential can be completely different. In other words, the same balance sheet can represent very different financial positions depending on how it's structured. A high net worth doesn't automatically mean financial flexibility, and a lower one isn't necessarily as restrictive as it might seem on its own. So where do you stand? closer to the $200,000 median or somewhere above it? And just as importantly, what does that number actually consist of once you break it down?